So you want to parse a 2D array in your custom editor class. Let me show you how. First of all, let's create a script. You might already have a script, but I'm going to create a test script. All right, so once we are in the script, I'm going to clear everything out, and I'm actually going to make this a scriptable object. We're going to make a custom class of this one. So create asset menu. Okay, so we're going to have a 2D array. That's obviously necessary. But before we move on, let's first create a public class grid holder editor. And we're going to need to take from editor since we are making an editor class. And we need to define the type. So we need custom editor type of grid holder because that's the name of our script in this case. And there we go. We got our editor class. All right, so a quick intervention. We need to surround our class with a hashtag if unity editor. Otherwise, when we try to build, it will crash and give you an error, or just, give you an error, not necessarily crash. But the point is you won't be able to build. So you just run the if unity editor and an end if at the end. And if you don't do this, you need to make this a whole separate class. You have a grid holder, grid holder editor.cs, and you need to put in a specific folder called editor. Okay, so now you're gonna need two things in order to parse through a 2D array in the custom editor. First of all, we have obviously our base class, which is grid holder, and in it we're gonna need an array, but the array needs to be specifically of another custom class, which you're gonna make right now. We're gonna call this custom class wrapper, since it's gonna basically just hold an array for us. If you're not aware, or if you're simply never thought about it, a 2D array is just an array of arrays. So if we make a custom class and give it an array, actually, then we get a 2D array. So we're gonna make a 2D array of t. So if you haven't dealt with generics, that means that we can pass whatever class we want into it, and we'll make an array out of it. So t array items or values. Let's go with values here, since that's what they have there, and I think that would be convenient. We also need to make sure this is public or serialized in some way. And speaking of serialized, it's a system that's serializable on this. It's very important. Whatever class you want to be visible in your editor, you need to make sure it's serialized. Okay, now here we need an array of wrappers. So this is where the 2D array part comes in, right? And we're gonna make it of type. Now let's make an enum. So whoops, I'm stupid. We need to make the actual enum first. So let's create an enum. Let's go public enum, and this is gonna be an enum of elements. We're gonna have water, fire, earth. Let's just leave it at that for now. And here let's have elements array. And we'll call this grid because we're making it to the array, and those are usually turned out in the form of a grid. Now this is an null array since we haven't assigned anything. So how about we assign stuff to it in the awake method? Actually, let's just create a method. Let's make it public as well, so that it can be used in our editor class. Let's call it reset grid, and we'll call reset grid in our awake, but only if grid is equal to null. That's important because otherwise it'll reset whenever we load back up our editor, which we don't want, right? That would, defeat the purpose of saving it in the first place. Okay, so let's go on. So grid is equal to new wrapper of elements array. We need a size for our thing, so let's just public int size is equal to 4, let's say, and let's make this a constant. So we have new wrapper of size. There you go. And we've created a new wrapper elements of size, but we also need to populate this. We also need to populate this. So grid I is equal to new wrapper of elements, just like that. And then we actually need to access the values inside of this class. So values is equal to, and we need to create an array for that too. So in that case, it's an array of elements, a new array of elements of size. So this is gonna be, in our case, a 4x4 grid, since that's what we've determined. Okay, now that we have everything set up in our base class, and again, remember this, you can modify the code however you want after the fact. But for now, let's move on to our editor. So in our editor, we're gonna, first of all, we're gonna need some properties, right? Be able to access grid and values, right? Since we want an array of these things. So we're gonna need a serialized property. So serialized property, I just have to double check. something. So I open as this reference, and this property we're gonna call grid since that's the same name that we have up here. So it's better not to let it get confusing. And we're gonna find grid on enable. So on enable is called whenever we access the script when regards to the scriptable objects. If you want to confirm that, we could quickly do a debug statement. That's all right. So I'm gonna ahead and made a grid. So if we open this, we'll see in the console we have opened. So that's because we've enabled it. So we're ready to move on to the next step, which is finding the actual grid property. So we have grid. I'm gonna need to go to find serialized object, the find property, and we're gonna type in the exact name of our grid, which again is grid with a it's case sensitive and everything. So and serialized object is just finding find property because serialized object refers to this grid holder here, right? So when we do find property, we're looking through grid holder. So if we wanted to find size, we could do that. Of course, we don't need to do that because there's a public constant value, but we could find it. And I am confident that we found it, but if you want, you could also, again, debug the log and then verify it, but we're going to skip that. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be overriding the onInspector GUI. And if you go back to the scriptable object, you'll see that there's nothing there now, and that's because we removed the base onInspector GUI and we're overriding it. So in order to parse through our array, actually, for the sake of being orderly, let me just cancel that. Let's create a public or private, I guess, private void draw grid. There you go. And we're also going to put this in a try catch just in case. We don't want our whole thing to start throwing out errors. So no debug the log or warning. Let's make it a warning. And we'll just put E in there. There you go. Okay, so here's where we're going to draw our grid. So let's also call it here. And there we go. Now that we have this, and we can, in our try catch, we can do a nested loop. So we're just gonna go based off of grid holder dot size, and same for the one inside. So grid holder dot size. There you go. And gonna go j equals. There you go. That changed all of them. All right. So now we have our nested loop. We're also gonna want to be able to access the property found in our grid, which is our wrapper. So in order to access the wrapper, remember since this is an array, the way you access arrays, single dimensional arrays, is by say grid, get a variable out of it. Actually, let's do it up here. So array, let's just call it array. So I'm gonna do array is equal to, then we need to do grid. So first we need to get the array element. So get array element at index. I'm gonna do I since we're in a loop. And then we do the find property, right? So first we get the wrapper, which has our values, and now we're gonna get our values, right? Since we've accessed the wrapper here, now we're gonna find the value inside of it, which is values. Okay, so now our array is equal to values, which is itself an array. So we're gonna access the array, and we're actually gonna go ahead and just label it over here. It's just temporary, so we can see what it looks like in our inspector. Okay, so if we go in our inspector, you can see a bunch of zeros, which probably do add up to 16, but that's not how we want to see it, is it? So let's just go here, and let's do the following. So we're gonna surround this with GUI layout that begin vertical, and we're gonna put it at the end. And if you want, you can check out and see what that does by itself. But the real important part comes here. Inside of the first loop, we're gonna do GUI layout that begin horizontal. So once we end down here, and we go back, we should see that it is now in a grid. There you go. It's a grid pattern now of 4 by 4. And now it's really like you've already done what you came here to do, which was access it to the array. But if we want to take it a step further and we want to change values inside the array and we want those values to persist, we're gonna need to do a couple of more things, right? So let's go back to our base on inspector GUI class, or I guess overridden on inspector GUI class. I'm gonna do the following: serialized object, which I'm gonna do update, right? So that's you want to do that first before anything, and then at the end we're gonna do serialized object that apply modified properties. This is preliminary to what we're gonna do after this. And just for the hell of it, for testing purposes, we're gonna also access the reset grid that we have up here. And we'll do that with, first of all, creating a reference to our original script. Now, I did say serialized object references our original script, but it doesn't have any of the methods of our original script. So we need to do the following. In our case, our script is grid holder. Let's go script is equal to grid holder, and cast it. There you go. So we cast the target as grid holder, and now we have a reference to the script. So now if we wanted to create a button, let's put it under the grid. If GUI layout that button, let's call this button reset. So if we want to do that, then we could just do script dot reset grid. There you go. So now if we were to go back, we'd see the reset grid button. Yeah, here it is. And if we hit it, nothing happens because we got nothing going on. We are getting an int value, and if you recall, we're using an enum, and that's because int values are represented in enums, right? So for example, however, this one we see it's equal to 0, this one's equal to 1, this one's equal to 2. You could also manually override this, but I recommend you don't do that for the sake of being able to easily access them. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make, instead of using a label, we're gonna create a button for each of these, right? And if we just make a button right now, nothing will change. So let's wait on that and go down here and do private void next index. It's gonna wrap around through our indexes. And on the note of that, we're gonna need a reference to the length of our enum. So if you don't know how to do that, let's show you. So let's unenable, let's create length is equal to enum get values and type of elements and length. You need to have system over here. Gotta have using system, otherwise you won't be able to use this enum. As you can see, system.enum. Moving on, now that we have the length, we can do the following, right? Okay, so that'll wrap around. So for example, if we're 0, we're not at 1. We're 2, and then increase, it's gonna wrap around back to 0. And we're gonna return this result. Right, there we go, we have net send it. So if you wanna get fancier with your script, you can, but we're gonna do something basic. So we're gonna call this method to toggle in a button. So we're gonna do if we lay out that button, this button's gonna have the label equal to the enum name. So let's actually get a reference to that before we move on. So I'm gonna create an enum of type elements. So elements is called element, and we're gonna reference it by just stealing this from over here. Dot int value, and we're gonna cast it as elements. There you go. All right, so now we can just do element dot to string, for example, as our label on the button. And down here, we also need a reference to the value itself. So let's just do that first. Bar. And down here, we're going to say value is equal to, or value is equal to next index value. If we back out now after saving everything, we'll be greeted with lots of water. And then if we toggle, changes to fire, earth, and whatever else. If you don't like the way that things are like shifting around, or we update, we can go back here and you see on the GUI layout button, you can also specify GUI layout that width or match width. And let's set it to something like 50. Let's see how that works out for us. Now, if we were to reset the editor, all of this should persist because earlier we did serialized object update and serialized apply modified properties. And also our reset button now does something, right? It makes it all water. So let's just, split things in whatever way. I'll close the editor and come back, and if it works, I think we're done here. All right, I've reset the editor, and the values are still here. So yeah, that'll be it. I will post this entire script on the description. If you want to do something more complicated with this, you can. As a matter of fact, I'll show you an example of me using the same methodology to apply icons and things, and then we create a new test layout over here. Let's just call it test. We can even just change the size of things, and then using the information that we store here, we'll be able to load up. Oh yeah, here's the board we made. So this is the player, this is an enemy that I designated we make, and that is all. So you can do something similar since you now store your values inside of a 2D array.